You ready to do this, Matt?
Yes, sir. Punch it, Chewie.
Welcome, Super Friends, to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, a safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot is Matt Shaw. We're two nerds that just refuse to grow up. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 151. We release every Thursday morning. You can find us on our website, fortofnerd.com. We have links to iTunes, Google Music, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, and everywhere podcasts are available. Stop by and relax a while. If you like what you're hearing, hit that subscribe button and get us automatically each and every week in your ear holes. Matt, it's been another week. What is going on, my brother?
It has been another week, and there has been a lot and a little going on at the same time. With a newborn, there's a lot going on, but also a little bit going on. Our first daughter, Emmy, was a crazy child from the get-go.
Yep.
Feeding was all weird and crying all the time, very needy and latchy, and would only fall asleep in your arms and blah, 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 blah. Lando is like a freaking dream. This child sleeps a solid 20 hours a day. I mean, he is always sleeping. And then he eats, and he never cries, and he's happy. He cries sometimes, but only when you're changing his diaper. Really, that's the only time he cries. So this week was a lot better than we had expected and anticipated based on our previous parenting experience. So
nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It was nice. We had my mother and father-in-law here. They left yesterday in the morning. So they were here all this last week. My father-in-law and I did a lot of projects, mostly him. Not re-landscaping, really just landscaping our backyard. We took out some rocks and some landscaping that was poorly done by whoever lived here previous, and we got a whole bunch of mulch and plants and dug things up and laid things and bought some border, and then we also made a strip probably 4 feet by 8 feet on our little backyard property, filled it with mulch, and it'll be for Emmy's little play area. And Lando, as they get older, we bought like an outdoor little play thing, and so we did that most of the week, and the rest of it was just kind of relaxing, honestly, with Lando being pretty easy and my mother and father-in-law here. We just kind of hung out quite a bit and talked and relaxed and watched some shows, and it was pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, are you now in-law-less?
Yeah. We are back to our new normal. Trying to kind of figure out what the new normal is, and Emmy's trying to navigate what her new normal is too. She's not the prized pig anymore, so she's trying to figure out where she fits.
I like how you just referred to your daughter as the prized pig. She's going to love to hear that when she gets older.
Charlotte's Web just came to mind, man. Zuckerman's famous pig. And, you know, sometimes you're not the famous pig. So she's getting a lot more daddy time, and she likes it. She's been pretty good, though. She hasn't been resentful of Lando or Jesse or anything like that. So that's been pretty nice. She's still happy and really acting pretty normal. Not a lot of
that's good.
Regression in like her sleep or potty training or anything like that. Just pretty standard for how she usually acts. So really, it's been a good week. Can't complain. How was your week? Tell me.
My week's been pretty good. So a couple things, like let's get into a house cleaning object right off the bat for me. So if you've listened, Super Friends, to this podcast for a long time, or even a short time, you probably get the sense that I take great pride in the audio quality of the podcast. And I do. And last week was the first time I recorded down in my new kind of like little basement studio. And when I listened back to do the editing, I noticed my voice sounded a little tinny and had a little bit of an echo to it. And I was so heartbroken that I didn't think of this to begin with, because my desk is literally about 3 feet away from a wall right behind me. So like I talk right at a wall, and then I got 2 walls about 3 feet to the side. Like I literally can touch the walls on both sides and touch the wall in front of me. And I realized I've got all these hard surfaces down here. Even though I've got like my green screen behind me and that cloth, and that'll help deaden some of the sound, I've got all these hard surfaces, and I didn't even think to do anything about that, because when I was upstairs in the living room, it was this big open room with couches and carpet and drapes and curtains and pillows and everything to kind of help deaden the sound. So it had a more richer, fuller sound, and it sounded better to me. Last week, I know was probably fine to most people, but it was a little rough to me. It drove me nuts. So I went out and bought a bunch of that foam audio deadening, and I put up a whole bunch of those panels in the office. I'll take a picture, Matt, and I'll send it to you. So now I've got a whole bunch of that like right behind the wall that I face, and then some to the walls to the side. And so I'm hoping that this week it sounds better. If it still has that effect, I'm going to go back on Amazon and I'm going to get a whole bunch more, because I've got other wall space and corners and things that I could put this in. And I'm just literally going to make this a sound studio. If whatever it's going to take to make sure the audio quality for you, the Super Friends, is the same as it always has been or better, that's my commitment to the podcast.
It sounds better.
Can you tell the difference?
Last week I was trying to explain. I was like, I don't know what to say. It's a little bit tinnier. I don't know. But yes, it sounds better. It sounds much better now.
Well, we'll see what happens with the edit.
Well, yeah.
So there's that. Let's see. So getting past that, like this week was really good for me. I streamed 4 days. So like my schedule I'm trying to shoot for is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. And I streamed all 4 nights, and I was streaming more Spider-Man. I'm working on the Platinum. I have 1 trophy left to get, which is purchase all of the spider suits, which is actually one of the tougher ones to get, because you have to complete the game. You have to complete all the DLC areas in order to get enough stuff to kind of unlock those suits, and then you have to go purchase them. So I'm just kind of grinding that out right now. And I put up a Twitter poll, and I think the game I'm going to start playing next is The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, which I haven't played before. I own it. I want to play it. And the Super Friends got on Twitter and they voted, so that's probably going to happen this week. Now, this is actually Tuesday night when we're recording, so it's going to be a quick turnaround until the podcast goes live Thursday morning. So I had to switch my schedule this week and not stream on Twitch because of something that happened yesterday. So anyway, so I streamed, but I'm not streaming tonight. I spent some time over the weekend setting up a custom emote. So if you're a subscriber to my Twitch channel, I now have my own personalized custom emote. My first one, more to come. I also set up a sub alert. So when someone else subscribes to my channel, it will play a little video with some music that I made that people are going to want to bebop and kind of dance along to. I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing, and I'm really excited for that. So if you're interested in seeing that, and you're interested in what I'm doing on Twitch, I'm at twitch.tv/sstapleton79, which is the same as like my personal Twitter handle, sstapleton79. And you can come watch me. I stream Tuesdays through Friday nights from about 8:30ish to about midnight, 12:30 Mountain Time. I'm there. Sometimes I start a little earlier, sometimes a little later. And if you happen to be an Amazon Prime member, you can actually go and link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account and make it a Twitch Prime account. And then once a month, you can actually subscribe to my channel or any other Twitch streamer's channel for free. And that's basically $5 that your Amazon Prime puts into the pocket of a Twitch streamer. Hopefully me, but anyone's great. And that's free. It doesn't cost anything. The only thing is you have to remember every month when that comes up, you're going to have to manually go back and do it. If you are a paid subscriber, you could actually pay for like a year in advance or just have it auto-renew on a credit card. So once a month, you could give $5 to your favorite, Twitch streamer, content provider, that sort of thing. But with the Amazon Prime that's free, you just have to remember to go in there. So I'd recommend set a little alarm on your calendar, same day once a month. It says, hey, go back and resub to, let's just say S Stapleton 79 on Twitch for giggles.
Awesome.
And it would do that. So I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for Amazon's money. Just let's be clear.
That's fair.
So that is there. But the reason I'm not streaming tonight was because last night, my college roommate from literally almost 20 years ago now called me up and said, hey, I'm going to be down in your neck of the woods and I'm free on Monday night. Are you available? I can drop in and come see you for a while. And I said, absolutely. I will move heaven and earth to make this happen because he is like a brother to me. If you've listened, Super Friends, to the podcast, you know how close Steve Madura and I are. And Johnner McComber is like that to me. And he dropped in. He came over like around 6 o'clock at night, and we hung out for a little bit. Then we went out and got some soup and just laughed ourselves silly. And then my wife texted me, said, hey, the kids are asleep. You can come back to the house. Because you know how it is when, at least in my house, my boys just, anyone new, they want to show off for, and they want to tell them stories. And look at my shirt and this shirt I got for this. And they will occupy that person's time. And so we came back when my wife said we had the all clear. We came back to the house and we just hung out. We ended up hanging out till like almost 12:30 at night. And then by the time I got to bed, it was like after 1. And it was so much fun. It felt so good. Like we just literally picked up right where we were when we were in college. And we just telling stories and laughing ourselves silly. And my wife heard some stories she hadn't heard before. And I had to give John the, I will kill you if you tell the next story I know you're prepping up to tell. Because she doesn't know that one, and best keep that one under your vest. That's also the nice thing, Matt. If you got friends like that, right? It's what I call mutually assured destruction. You bring up a story that you're going to bury me with, and I'm going to get in trouble. Just so you know, I've got one in my pocket about you.
It's true.
And so it kind of keeps, it keeps it at a detente, so to speak. So anyway, so that was a lot of fun. I appreciate you being willing to move the podcast back, which of course then scared me because you said that the power went out in Texas in your neck of the woods for a while today.
Yeah, we had a nice one move through, a good thunderstorm that hit us, and all of a sudden, at 7 o'clock, boom, power's out. And usually, that'll happen every once in a while, but it'll come back on in 5 to 10 seconds, and nope. Then we checked online, they said 10 p.m., and I said, what? I gotta record, man. The power came on at like 9 o'clock. I said, perfect. It worked out great. We had a nice little night with no power, and it actually worked out okay. Nice.
All right, so the last thing I want to tell you about my week. I don't know if you and I talked about this yet, but I'm also going to be a little careful about how I say this because my kids listen, and I'm not wanting to spoil this yet because it's too far out. So, if you remember a couple podcasts ago, we talked about the fact that new sailings were opening on DCL, which, if you know what that stands for, just think about it for a minute. It's a Disney boat service, okay? So, we talked about how they were going to open up in a couple weeks, and we were talking about rebooking and setting something up for early 2021. And my buddy Arctic MM77 on Twitter, my buddy Matt, mentioned, he sent me a message that says, hey, I don't know if you've talked about this yet, but my family is actually looking to go around Thanksgiving. We're doing 7 nights, Eastern Caribbean, on the Fantasy, which is the ship Matt, you, and I were on when we went with our whole family. He says it's going to be a Christmas time cruise. He's super excited about it. And he was just wondering what we ended up doing. And so the reality is we have a booking for Western Caribbean in early 2021, which is going to go from Port Canaveral. We're going to go to Cozumel, Mexico, Falmouth, Jamaica, and then the Grand Cayman Islands. And then also Castaway Cay, which is the Disney-owned island. And then back to Cape Canaveral. It's going to be a week. It's going to be like the first week of February 2021. And we're doing it with our in-laws. So it's going to be a good time, but I'm trying to like not get into details and use a lot of words in case my boys do listen. But Matt, I'm excited for you. You are going to have a great time when you go over Thanksgiving. I'm just going to say this. I don't know the ages of your kids, but if you got younger kids, that kids club, the Oceaneers Adventure Club, I think is what they call it, is great. They will love it. They will be all engaged in it, and it'll give you and the missus time to just like have to yourself. There's so much to do, whether you're into, you know, the shows that they have, or music, or trivia things, or like they got like, I don't know, games and stuff. They got cooking demonstrations. Just time on the beach, time on the deck. I mean, just it's relaxing, it's fun, but it's also that Disney magic. So, big congrats to you. I'm excited for you. You're going to have to let us know when you come back how your experience was. And, you know, after the first week of February in 2021, I'll let you know how my experience was this go-round.
Awesome.
Which also, Matt Shaw.
That's me.
By the way, we're going to have to figure out how to record around that. I grant it, we have a little bit of time.
Got some time to plan.
We got a little over a year to figure that out, but just FYI. Okay. 15 months from now.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's kind of been my week. I mean, it's just been, you know, time with the family, streaming, setting stuff up, looking at computers, because I think that I may need to upgrade my processor, which means upgrade my motherboard and upgrade my RAM to something that'll handle the video encoding aspect of the streaming a little bit better. So, you know, we'll see. Stepping my game up.
Love it.
Trying to make sure that, like I try to do on this podcast, if I'm going to do something, I want it to be quality, and that makes it easier for me to enjoy it and for others to enjoy it.
Right on.
So, anyway, barring that, I think it's time, Matt. We kill some boffins.
Yay!
Is there any particular way this week you would like to do the deed?
Start with the arms and then the legs and call it good from there, I think.
As in, like, rip the arms and legs off and beat them to death style. With their own arms and legs?
I don't even think we got to beat them. I think we just leave them.
No.
It's gross this time, but that's how I want to do it.
Gory.
I always have to let you know, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, you Bothans.
All right, Super Friends, we are into Rebel Intelligence. The corpses of Bothans that have bled out are all over the place. It's a huge mess. Clean up on aisle 3. Clean up on aisle 3. Matt, what do you got for me this week?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with Marvel news.
Okay.
Little Marvel news. Kevin Feige has received a promotion of sorts. Actually, not of sorts. Definitely a promotion. He's now received the title of Chief Creative Officer, in addition to, you know, what he does now. And that means that he is over storytelling for not just the movies, but all the TV shows, whether that's live action or animated, along with the comics. Wow. So really he is everything Marvel now. There's nothing that Marvel creates content-wise that he doesn't have the final say. That's kind of how this works now. He's in all the ways that they present a story for Marvel. He is overseeing all of it. Pretty cool.
Do you think that is pretty cool? Do you think that's a good thing, though?
Yes, and I say that because Kevin Feige, to me, has proven that he's a master storyteller and a master at interweaving story. I like the idea, especially with how successful the MCU has been, that these stories make sense together and they're cohesive, and that the TV shows and the movies and the comics kind of all work out. I don't know that they have to or that they always will, but that Kevin Feige, who has in his mind how this should look and how this should play out, kind of gets some creative control as to how the stories are going to work together or not work together. So I like it. I wish there was something like this for Star Wars, just judging by how the last 2 films have gone. 2 different storytellers telling kind of the same story, but really they're each their own standalone more than they work together. And so I wish we had something more like this with Star Wars sometimes, but I don't know.
Well, it's like, go back to the original trilogy in Star Wars. George Lucas, even though you had like Lawrence Kasdan, who was, directing Empire, and, there was different directors for Empire and Return of the Jedi, and there was other people that helped write the screenplays for those movies. It was still George's universe. George still had control over it. He kind of oversaw everything, right? So episodes 4, 5, and 6 kind of seemed to flow to, one to the next, right? So like, I get the whole shared universe and kind of one man trying to oversee that. And I think Kevin Feige is a very talented person, by all stretches of the imagination. I've sang his praises on this podcast a ton. Here's my concern. I'm going to play devil's advocate just a little bit here. It's one guy. Now, I know he's going to be working with a team and people are going to be working, but like, inevitably, it's one guy. We're talking now about all of the previous Marvel MCU franchises, right? So, you've got the Avengers stuff, you've got the Thor stuff, you've got Ant-Man and the Wasp, you've Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, stuff like that. So you got all these individual things that he's still going to try to weave, because he's going to have to continue to interweave some of these stories, right?
Yes.
Now you add on the TV shows, so like The Mandalorian and all the stuff that's going to be going on.
Well,
not The Mandalorian, but all the Loki and all the
WandaVision and Hawkeye.
WandaVision, yeah, Hawkeye stuff. So all the stuff that's going to be on Disney Plus over there, the Marvel stuff. And then the comics. But you also got to remember, we've got Deadpool that's now coming into the MCU, Fantastic Four, and X-Men. And these are all properties that are going to need to be done and done well. And I expect that Kevin Feige is going to have a hand in that to figure out a way to weave them in. And I think that's going to be done. But I do wonder if we're going to get to a point where 2 things are going to happen. One, everything is going to have the kind of too similar of a feel. Yeah. Like, so for instance, the X-Men films in the past, which I understand they're going to get rebooted and recast, but they had kind of a different tone to them than the MCU, even though they're all Marvel characters and that we should be able to cross them over. A different tone. Deadpool definitely has a different tone, completely. And then, like the Netflix shows, the Daredevil, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, the Defenders, like all those kind of had a different feel to them. And so I just wonder if we're going to get to a place where diversity sometimes is a good thing. That maybe, maybe it'll all feel like it's too similar. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, it could have that. Also, what happens if the guy goes out and gets hit by a bus?
Right.
And there's that worry, like, I know he's a younger guy, like, his health, he seems to be a somewhat healthy guy, regular guy. So I'm not worried about like him getting too old and not finishing a book or something, a la George R. R. Martin. But it's more, what if he steps out and gets hit by a bus? What if, an accident, a freak accident happens? If he hasn't given like good instructions to the teams he's working with, this, that, and the other, like, if all that cohesiveness is all really on one guy and he's the linchpin and something happens, you're going to have a lot of big properties that are making a lot of money that they're going to want to continue making money, Disney will, and now they may lose that kind of creative direction. That's my only kind of concern with putting all eggs in his basket.
Right. Well, I'm sure they thought of that, and they probably have a specific team that he can't do it all himself anyway. There's just no way. And so
there's too much.
There's, you're in charge of the Avengers characters. You're in charge of making sure these powers work the way they're supposed to work. They do what they're supposed to do, and that these things don't trip each other up with the X-Men or whatever. So, but I get that. I get that. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of weave all these different stories, if they choose to weave X-Men in with the MCU at all, or if they exist in their own MCU. I don't know. We're gonna find out shortly, I think.
Yeah. And remember, he's also going to be doing
a Star Wars movie,
isn't he?
Supposedly.
Yeah. A lot of stuff. But if anyone can do it, I know it'll be him. I have no doubt about that. It's just a little worry it's a lot of burden to bear. That's
Agreed.
all. All right, so I have something that's Marvel related, kind of more comics related, 90s animated Marvel. However, it's interesting because this franchise is about to become part of the MCU here in the next few years. The X-Men. Do you remember the X-Men animated series?
Vaguely. I didn't really watch it.
Well,
I watched Power Rangers.
You're going to have the opportunity. You're going to have the opportunity in less than a month when it's on Disney Plus. So the X-Men animated series literally was a fantastic version of the X-Men. It was animated. It came out like around, I want to say like 92, right? That's when it debuted. Now, what's interesting, why we're going to talk about the X-Men animated series that came out in 92 and has been off the air for, a couple decades. A Hungarian man has filed a lawsuit against Marvel, Disney, Fox, Apple, Amazon, and a few others. Along with the folks from Saban Entertainment, they were the ones that did the X-Men animated. He's claiming that the theme song was plagiarized.
Ooh.
And so you kind of go, okay,
Statute of limitations or something on this?
This seems to be really old. So what's interesting is that there's this man, his name is Zoltan Crisco. I know, it sounds like he's the character from the movie Big. Zoltan Crisco, who claims to be managing the estate for the Hungarian composer Grigory Vukan, says that Vukan's theme song for the 1980s crime drama Linda the Policewoman, which was a Hungarian show on Hungarian TV, it bears a striking similarity to that old X-Men animated series theme song. And I watched the opening clip of Linda Policewoman from the 1980s. And I'm gonna say right here and right now, there is a striking resemblance.
Interesting.
Enough that I kind of went, ooh, there may be a case here. However, I don't know statute of limitations, first of all. Also, I don't know what international copyright law is going to look like from a TV show that ran in Hungary from like 1983 to 1989. I don't know that. But here's also something I remember hearing one time, because I was listening to a podcast or an interview, and someone was talking literally about how most like rock and roll songs all come from about the same kind of 4-chord rock and roll, and eventually you get a lot of riffs, guitar riffs that sound really similar to guitar riffs from other songs, or the rhythm here sounds exactly like the rhythm over here, and sometimes, in some cases, it is, and it's not necessarily people are intentionally infringing and trying to rip off someone else's music, but that you get to a point in certain genres that it gets hard to be new and creative and come up musically with something that's completely different. It says TV theme shows, 80s, 90s. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, but a lot of like if you go back and listen to like X-Men animated series, then you go back and listen to like Ultimate Spider-Man, 2 completely different shows, but there's similar themes and sounds and sound effects that are used between those 2 shows. It just says, oh, this is a 90s cartoon to me. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So whether there's anything here or not, a lot of people who have either put together the animated series of the X-Men back in the day, or people that have streamed it in recent years, are all getting sued by a Hungarian guy.
Oh, Volkor, whatever his name is.
Vukan.
What a guy.
I don't know where this is going, but I saw this and I thought this was really, really interesting.
Wow.
So if you get a chance, go watch the beginning to Linda the Policewoman from Hungary, and you decide for yourself.
I can't wait. That actually sounds like a good show. It got a few seasons, 83 to 89.
Yeah.
It must have been pretty successful out there in Hungary. That ain't bad.
I was like, this is also Hungary. I don't know what television looked like during the Cold War there.
Rough. I can tell you right now, if what's it called? Hungary the policewoman?
Linda the
That's
policewoman.
even worse than Hungary the policewoman. What a terrible name. Anyway, good luck, Volcar. I hope you win. I've got something Marvel too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Let's talk Deadpool.
Okay.
So, the writers of Deadpool, I believe Mr. Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese.
Yep.
They were out and about promoting Zombieland Double Tap, which just came out. And they were asked about Deadpool. What's the plans for Deadpool? We haven't heard anything about Deadpool. Deadpool 2 came out, 2 years ago? Around 2 years ago? A year and a half ago?
The first Deadpool?
Deadpool 2. The last one.
That was last year. Or even this year. No, last year.
They did Once Upon a Deadpool
It came out in
Christmas,
2018.
so it came out middle of last year. Anyway, long story short, they were asked about number 3, and they said, quote, "The plan and the hope is that Marvel allows us to continue Deadpool in his R-rated universe that he lives in, and also, hopefully over time, we'll get to play a little bit in the MCU sandbox as well. It is all undetermined, though." So they've been thinking about it. I would assume that they have begun to write things for it. And I believe this morning or yesterday, when you're listening to this podcast, it'll be a few days ago, Ryan Reynolds on his Instagram posted a photo of him at Marvel Studios. So there's some, rumblings and rumors and hopes about what this could mean. And I hope he can continue to do his thing. I hope he gets to, I don't necessarily want Disney to censor him down. I think when it comes to maybe like playing in the MCU sandbox, they might have to do what they did for Once Upon a Deadpool, right? And make it funny how he can censor himself and, make it part of his brand. But this to me is not a surprise that they've already been thinking about it. It's an ultra successful franchise. Ryan Reynolds is obviously engaged in Deadpool. He tweets all the time about Deadpool as if he were being Deadpool in his tweets. So there's a lot of love for the franchise. I'm going to assume that it's going to go exactly how they want it to go, and they get their own little R-rated universe, and that he will get to play in the MCU. What do you think?
I think it's possible. It definitely would be a different avenue than Disney has pursued with Marvel to date, right to this point. I don't know. They could have him tone it down a little bit and have it be a hard PG-13, so it still feels like the other Deadpool movies, just slightly toned down, right. And then they can keep it from being R. Maybe they do it. I don't know. It's really, really hard to say how it's going to be handled. But I don't know. We'll see. Out of curiosity, it was May 18th.
Okay.
2018 was when Deadpool 2, or as we called it here by accident, Deadpool Tool, was released. Oh. Yeah, we kept saying Deadpool Tool instead of Deadpool 2.
That is not the name of the movie, Deadpool Tool.
No, it's
Deadpool
not.
2.
I think I misspoke and Stu mocked me for it, and then we just kind of ran with it for a little while.
Gotcha.
So.
Well, I agree. I think they could do PG-13 too. And Once Upon a Deadpool was hilarious, and the story was still able to be told, and he was still as funny, and at times it was still vulgar and crude. And so I can see them going either way. But I just hope that they don't lose the creativity that makes him so fun and silly and relatable at the same time because of how crass he can be. I think we can all relate to that side of ourselves a bit.
Yep. All right, so I actually have something that's crass and a little hard to listen to. So, Super Friends, for you on your behalf, I bit the bullet and listened to this knowing that it was going to be rough with some rough language. So I'm going to give you the gist of this. If you want to go look at this, fair warning, very, very, very adult language. But Freddie Prinze Jr., who voices Kanan on Star Wars Rebels, was doing a podcast called think it's called like the Friendship Pod. And basically, he went off on this rant against the Star Wars fandom and like the Star Wars fans. And he covered a lot of stuff. Like he talked about how fans don't understand a lot of what's going on. And how, because they don't understand, they go to the internet and they complain. And he talked about Grey Jedi, which is totally a fan-made-up thing. It's not canon, but they try to make it canon and, you know, talk about it enough. And basically he went on this whole rant, and some of it was really kind of interesting. Like he talked about how the fact that if you look at Star Wars, and he says there's always balance. He says the Force isn't necessarily about like moving rocks and shooting lightning from your fingertips. It's about balance. So if one side becomes too powerful and starts, you know, dominating the other side, something happens to correct that so that the Force becomes balanced again. He says, look at it this way. He says, Palpatine was an immensely smart individual because he understood that he was amassing all this power, and he could have gone against Anakin. But then Anakin, you know, if he didn't treat Anakin a certain way, Anakin could have gone to the other side and balanced out for the light. So instead, he seduces him to the dark side, gets him on his side. But then what does the Force do? The Force allows for the birth of twins, Luke and Leia, Force users from Anakin's lineage, to be born that would help balance out the Force, because now you have two on one side, now you just had two more on the other. And then he kind of goes through the movies and says, you look at it, you know, he says, you have the balance here, you have the balance there. So like when we see the beginning of A New Hope, and you see like, you know, the Rebel Alliance is down, and the Sith, you know, with Vader and Emperor Palpatine are dominating. Eventually Luke comes to power and it's balanced. Is Luke the craziest, you know, best Jedi? No, he's not. But he's what was needed at that time to balance out the Force. And so he kind of says, he's like, look at how this goes. And then, of course, I'm paraphrasing a lot because there was a lot of cussing. But he says, if you look at it like this, he says, this is what's going to happen in this final movie. He's like, it's not hard to see what's going to happen. There has to be balance. This thing has to balance itself back out. It's very one-sided right now. Again, he also talked about Darth Maul for a little bit, and he's like, Darth Maul is Sisyphus. He says he's just rolling that stone up the hill, knowing that before it gets to the top, it's going to roll back down. He's going to have to do it again. He's like, you know, he knows this. Like, Darth Maul knows this. He's in on it. Like, he understands that, like, fans want Darth Maul to, you know, persevere and overcome, but then, you know, that doesn't happen, and he always gets knocked back down, and da-da-da. So he was talking about this. He talked about Grey Jedi. He was like, you know, Grey Jedi don't exist. Stop trying to make it. It's balanced. There's either the light or the dark. There's no middle. I haven't taken a side. I haven't chosen a side. And he even like quotes some of the stuff from like Qui-Gon Jinn. And it's really interesting because Freddie Prinze Jr. like has worked with Dave Filoni for like the last, like maybe 5, 6, 7 years. And Dave Filoni is heavily invested in Rebels, heavily invested in Clone Wars. He was literally George Lucas's handpicked successor, has been with the company, knows probably more than anyone other than George in the Star Wars universe. And Freddie Prinze Jr. has worked with him for like maybe even like the last decade or close to the last decade. And he's like, I work with Dave Filoni all the time. He's like, I'm so sick and tired of these Star Wars fans going on and like talking all this stuff and making up stuff that doesn't exist. He's like, if you really knew what it is, you'd see what it was. He's like, and I'm so sick and tired of people complaining that this isn't the Star Wars anymore. It's like, Star Wars was made for kids back in the 70s and early 80s. And then those people grew up, and the prequels were made for kids and, you know, for teenagers. And people complained because it didn't feel like the same Star Wars. He's like, it was still movies made for kids. He's like, these ones are made for kids of this generation. He's like, all you guys are getting old and you're complaining that this isn't your Star Wars. He's like,
It's not.
Your Star Wars was the other things. Like, this is for the new generation. Anyway,
Interesting.
it was interesting. It was like he had some very insightful stuff, but he was also ranting pretty heavily and using a lot of adult language. And so it was hard to listen to, but it was interesting, some of the things he made. Comparisons to, I mean, he was talking about, Greek mythology and, anyway.
Okay, Freddie.
Really interesting. Really, really interesting. However, if you're going to go watch it or listen to it, you have been warned.
Rough. Are you talking like 50 plus F words?
Yeah.
Okay. How long is it?
It's basically like, imagine Scarface, but imagine the content of Scarface is talking about Star Wars and the Star Wars universe.
Okay. So this isn't like Patton Oswalt's rant about how Star Wars and...
No. Patton Oswalt's like, it's comedy,
great.
it's funny, it's great. No, this is more like,
Wow.
you people, blah, 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 you got to stop this. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're projecting what you want onto this. And just...
Well, that's interesting. I don't think he's wrong. I do think the Star Wars fan base can be toxic at times, and people, especially with this last movie, really had their mind of where this was going to go, and when it didn't, everybody lost their freaking minds.
I mean, I'm in that camp. I'm in that camp that Star Wars: The Last Jedi I did not enjoy. I enjoyed it enough as a standalone movie, but to me, like, it didn't feel like it fit in with The Force Awakens, and like you said, different directors, different direction. Yep. But then also some of the character stuff just felt so off to me, especially because I'd read so many books that had Luke Skywalker in them that used to be canon, and now they're considered like legends and not part of the extended universe, and so there was big problems I had with it. On its own, it was a decent movie, but like in the whole, it kind of felt like an outlier, and things didn't feel right. And I freely admitted, like, I had problems with it, and I still kind of do. But, Freddie Prinze Jr. makes some good points, The movies are what they are, and maybe they're made for a different generation. And even though I love Star Wars, if I look at them, the movies that I enjoy the most is the original trilogy. Yeah. And then probably also Rogue One, because it's literally that feels like it could belong to the original trilogy.
That's fair. Interesting. Well, we could talk about Star Wars all night, but let's move on to something that's pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much Star Wars. It's a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air spin-off series.
Oh, so definitely the same thing as Star Wars.
Basically like the same. Oh, by the way, we're getting a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air spin-off series developed by Will Smith. Wow. That's pretty much what we know. Will Smith's company. So
we don't know if it's
Janet
like continuing on.
We don't know anything about what it's going to be. We just know their company is making a spin-off series based or spun off from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
So maybe this will be like Will's kids and Carlton's kids living in a house together.
Maybe. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know if it'll be kind of like a Fuller House situation where we're going to have some of the core cast back for, to tie people over like us, right? To get interested in it. If they're going to have some of the core back, or if it's just going to be like a true, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a spinoff they end up going with. I don't know if Will Smith will be in it. I'm sure he would guest star in it or something like that from time to time,
right?
Just to get people interested. Anyway, that's all the information we have about it. Just know it's out there, y'all, and it's coming for you. And I would bet that this is I think this is a perfect candidate for NBC's streaming service.
Yep.
That's what I see. I don't see it fitting with their brand of comedy the way that they are comedy now. Right? They don't fit the same mold like they used to with their comedies. So this to me seems like a perfect candidate for their streaming service.
Okay. I like that. All right, my last thing. Nothing to do with Will Smith. Nothing to do with Marvel, nothing to do with Star Wars. But it is my man Tom Hanks, and I love me some Tom Hanks. So, Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg are returning to the World War II era once again, but this time they're taking it to the skies. We're going to get a show with these guys executive producing called Masters of the Air. It's basically going to be a mini-series similar to like Band of Brothers and The Pacific, which was all on HBO. those two. But basically it's going to focus on the American bombers during the war. And it's going to be kind of like a companion piece to Band of Brothers in the Pacific. It's also going to have Gary Goetzman as their collaborator, executive producer, Playtone, Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment, television. So basically, like, this was pitched. It's what they're going to do. They're going to kind of go back to that well again, but this time, talk about the airmen. It was pitched to HBO, I know, but HBO basically decided to kind of pass on it. I don't know if it's just because of cost or what. Maybe they've got a lot of other stuff going on. Maybe didn't fit in. But basically, it's a new service. Apple streaming, this Apple Plus, whatever they're calling it, Apple TV. Yeah. It's Masters of the Air is going to be over there. It's going to be one of the first things that launches when Apple's streaming service, I think, hits the air. I'm excited by this. I loved Band of Brothers. I loved The Pacific. And I'm going to love this too. I just don't think there's any way I can't, because I don't know. Those movies or those shows, those miniseries, both had kind of the same feel of like Saving Private Ryan, and I don't know, just so good. So
yeah,
I'm excited.
I'm excited for it too. I do think it's interesting that this is not going to be on HBO. I kind of want to know the behind the scenes of what really happened here. If Apple just simply outbid them or how it works, but it says they're spending $200 million on this show, and it's just about 8 hours, a little over 8 hours, they said. That's a lot of content. That is a lot of money, and I don't really know what Apple TV Plus is. I don't really get what they're doing still. I don't get the strategy. They're spending a lot of money, and their service is like $5 a month, and they're only having exclusive like Apple content, which is like 5 things that we know of. It's a totally different take on the streaming wars, because most of them are building on franchises that already exist or things they already own. Yep. And Apple's like, I don't know what we're doing. Everybody will spend whatever I tell them to spend because I'm Tim Cook and we're Apple. And it's interesting. Right. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Apple TV Plus. Honestly, I kind of hate it, and I'm a little bit frustrated that it exists.
Yeah, I'm not going to get it.
I'll get it because it's free to me, because I just bought this MacBook and I get it free for a year with a new purchase of a computer, so that's great. But I'm a little bit pissed off at it, to be honest. I think it's, even at $5, I think it's overpriced for what I can get for $4 at Disney Plus. It's ridiculous. But anyway, this is not about Apple TV Plus. It sounds like a cool show. Maybe this is the reason that I'll pick it up, or that I'll even take the time to sign up for this. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We will see. That's the last thing I had. Do you have anything else? You're out. All right. So last week we had a fun discussion about 80s movies and whether they held up.
Yes.
And Matt broke not only my heart, but the hearts of many of our super friends in the Fortress of Nerditude.
I knew this was coming. I can't wait. Bring on the fire.
Just so you know. So we are going to start with our email like we always do, which is fortofnerd@gmail.com.
What's Peter got to say to me?
You can give us the long form answer right there. So we're going to start with Peter Christensen. A late follow-up to episode 135 first.
Oh my gosh.
He says, bonus comments for episode 135. We watched Toy Story 4 and I finished listening to that episode. Remember, he said he wasn't going to listen to that because he wanted to watch the movie with his family. He says, I went in wondering why this movie existed, aside from money, and still kind of felt like that after watching it the first time. That's exactly what I said, Peter, by the way. He says, but after rewatching it, I saw that this movie was made for and will be very special to people who feel worthless, suicidal, abandoned, as well as orphans, foster children, and empty nesters. The movie is literally about searching for a reason to exist. Woody, Bo, Sporky, it's actually Forky. Sorry,
anyway.
Peter. Forky, Gabby, all have their own journey to find a new story for their lives. I didn't pick up on it at first because I've never felt like that. In contrast, Toy Story 3 was exactly aimed at parents whose children are leaving the house, which matches up with the age of many Pixar employees and is in my near future, so it hit very close to home. So in short, Toy Story 4 is just as emotionally resonant as its predecessors, but for different groups of people. I actually think that's a really, really insightful thing there, because I too, if you recall, when we did the Toy Story 4 movie club on the podcast back in episode 135, I kind of came away with this saying, like, I enjoyed the movie, but I didn't kind of understand after watching it the first time, like, what's the thing emotionally? It ends on such a good note on 3, and then I ended up going back another time. I think I took my kids, and I kind of saw it a second time with different eyes, and I kind of went, actually, man, there's a lot here, and I think Peter hits it right. This movie definitely is for a different group of people, and I think it is emotionally resonant with people that may be struggling with other things. These feeling of abandonment, of loss, of not belonging. Like, I get that. Like, I think Peter's right on the money there.
I agree. That's good.
He says, my spirit toy would be the army men, capable of doing lots of important jobs, but never the center of attention. Cheers, Peter Christensen. He says, P.S. Buzz is really, really dumb when he's not interacting with Woody. That is true. That is very true. Okay, now we'll go to Peter Christensen's response from last week. He says, Dear nerds, big congrats to Lando, Matt, Jesse, and Emmy.
Yay, thanks.
We have a similar name issue. Our son Max is actually Peter Maxwell, but he gets genuinely confused if you call him Peter. I'm genuinely excited about the Inspector Gadget announcement. I want to see the impressive animation technologies Disney has developed with their remakes, Jungle Book, Aladdin, Lion King, etc., applied to a new movie, and I'm sure modern Disney can do a good job with the characters and story. Let us not speak of the Matthew Broderick movie. Let's all just have a moment of silence for the Matthew Broderick movie.
Doesn't deserve it.
Thank you. It's just, rest in peace.
Thank you.
When deciding whether an older movie holds up, I see 3 main pitfalls. First, some content is not acceptable by today's standards. Example, 80s sex comedies. Very true. Second, technical issues like special effects, locations, costumes, and props, etc. I first noticed this when watching Addams Family with my kids. The movie was funny, the story was good, and the actors great, but the set and background looked so cheap, like they built it in 1 hour with the contents of Hobby Lobby. I also noticed this in the 1989 Batman. So many great things, but I couldn't not see cheap sets. This also applies to most pre-1980s action movies. They're just technically insufficient by today's standards. Third, as Matt mentioned, editing and pacing wreck a lot of otherwise good older movies. Modern movies are edited so tightly that the leisurely pace of some older movies, especially padding before and after dialogue or action, make them just drag. Here are my lists. Movies that don't hold up. Undercover Brother. I know it's from the 90s, but this was the movie that taught me that some movies should remain fond memories. Gremlins.
Ooh.
Too slow, not scary or gory enough by modern standards. The Wizard. Nothing can match the hype of 9-year-olds excited about video games. Short Circuit. I still love the robot, Johnny 5 by the way, but it broke my heart that my first Indian character, Ben Javari, was played by the white Fisher Stevens. It didn't help that my second Indian character, Apu, was voiced by Hank Azaria. Movies that do hold up. Gremlins 2. It's so weird and wacky that it fits in perfectly with the modern internet culture. By the way, this next one, Peter, I love you, man. Karate Kid. Great music, decent fight scenes, immortal plot.
Yep.
Goonies, the ultimate kid adventure. And last, but not least, The Princess Bride. There's a shortage of perfect movies in the world. 'Twould be a pity to damage this one. Cheers, Peter Christensen.
Good comments. I like that. Yeah, there's some things you don't want to touch, and Gremlins is another fan base you don't want to frustrate. You don't want to piss those guys off. But I agree with him on Gremlins too, actually. It's a little bit slower than I remember it being as a kid. I watched it. Jesse'd never seen it. We watched it a few years ago, and Gremlins was a little bit rougher than I remember.
I loved Gremlins as a kid. I tried watching it around Christmas time a few years back, and I went, this is a little slower than I remember.
It really is.
But anyway, thank you, Peter.
Yes,
thank you for your answers. Let's go over to Facebook. You can find us facebook.com/FordofNerd. And we have Caleb Albers, who says, I would like to take a moment to explain what happened last week. I messed up really bad with how I ranked my choices.
Oh, thank you.
When it came to how I ranked the actors, I did worst to best. And for some reason, when I ranked the movies, I went from best to worst.
Okay.
So to those of you who were judging me very harshly, I'm assuming there was some, because I was judging myself very harshly, I apologize for my mistake, and it will not happen again.
Okay.
Don't let it happen again,
That was
Caleb.
so confusing.
It's just unacceptable.
We assumed
Caleb.
the worst? Oh my gosh, I was still thinking about that. I was like, who would ever? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah. He says, now to this question of the week. I recently watched this movie with my wife. I do not know if it's from the 70s or 80s. I'm assuming it was from the 80s because it's got one of the best references from Stranger Things Season 3. And that movie is The Neverending Story.
Yep, that's
Definitely
80s.
1980s. It may be because I'm a huge story buff, but I thoroughly enjoyed this movie despite the aged graphics and bits of overacting. I feel like this movie has aged fairly well, and this being a movie I've only seen as an adult, it surprised me how it managed to keep my attention, because that is usually not the case with older movies like that. Some others that hold up really well are definitely Batman, 1989 Batman, Matt.
Disagree.
I'm adding the Matt is emphasis by me, not by Caleb. Superman with Christopher Reeves, The Goonies, Breakfast Club, and classics like those. So, here's the thing. The only thing I'm going to nitpick, Caleb, are we talking Superman from 1978 with Christopher Reeve? Or are we talking like Superman 2, which was like 1980, 1981, that has, General Zod and the Phantom Zone? Because if we're talking that, Superman 2 is an amazing film as well. We're cool. That's an 80s movie. Technically, Superman, the motion picture, the first one, 1978. That's a late 70s movie. I'll give you a pass. Just saying, information. Super Friends information. All right. Let's move on over to that old Twitter, which is @FordofNerd. So, we got a few. Bernabe Butterteeth @Dantes_Belmont says, Great Scott! Totally holds up, right? I mean, we do have flying cars and all. Obviously, he's talking Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future holds
totally
up.
does.
I think you and I discounted that because it was almost too easy. Tim Paulin @TPaulin20 says, doesn't hold up. Revenge of the Nerds. Loved it as a kid, but man, as an adult, it's just stupid. Holds up. Spaceballs. A Mel Brooks star-studded parody of Star Wars. How could it not? Which I think Spaceballs is highly quotable.
Oh, man.
And I quote it quite a lot. Also, Batman 89? You didn't think I'd let that go now, did you, Matt?
Hey, we don't know what he means by that, okay? There's no other information there.
He also, in the response to the tweet that said, hey, this episode's gone out, he put something, he said, really, Matt? Really? Batman 89? What is going wrong with you? Like, you're crazy. I don't have it right in front of me, but that's the gist of what it was. Trust me.
Take your childhood out of it and rewatch it. That's all I'm going to say. Try and look at the
Pipe
makeup,
down,
the
rub-a-dub.
sets, the camera.
It's great.
That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Great acting,
All right.
though. Go ahead.
We got to move on because you're wrong. Network-newbie.
That's why we got to move on. Gotcha.
That's why I got to move on. @dspin67 says, Terminator sorta holds up. Some of the special effects are a little iffy. Don't get me wrong. It was basically a B science fiction movie when it was made in like 84, I think is when it came out. 86? 86. I think it's 86. 84. Gosh, someone's going to oops me on this. Anyway, it was kind of basically a B science fiction movie when it came out. There wasn't a lot of money in that budget for that film anyway, so I definitely give the special effects a pass. Holds up. Die Hard. Yippee-ki-yay. Definitely holds up. Back to the Future, which we've talked about, agree, holds up. Aliens, one of my faves. Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yup.
The Burbs. Ooh, The Burbs is a good call. You totally could redo The Burbs now. Slightly change it and keep much of the dialogue the same and it would still be good. National Lampoon's Vacation. Saw it the other day. Raiders of the Lost Ark, still awesome. I agree. Raiders of the Lost Ark always going to hold up. Stu Jones, former co-host at DCOW, says, Wrath of Khan, obviously. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Super listener Chad at Chad Fackler 1 says, Ghostbusters. Once again, I'm assuming that's in the hold up category because I agree that it holds up. Matt agreed that it holds up. Yeah. And then Arctic M77 at Arctic M77, Matt, who talked to us a little bit about that trip his family's taking, says, there's the classic Star Wars and Indiana Jones that hold up, but my guilty pleasure of Better Off Dead.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I'm not sure in terms of character connections and storylines. Don't think a movie like that can get away with some of the stuff now. What are your thoughts on the movie? Have you seen it? I definitely have seen Better Off Dead. I've seen it multiple times. But it was like literally back in the day, like late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. I mean, I've watched it a bunch. I haven't actually seen it lately. I think I've looked to see if it's streaming anywhere or if you can buy it like on iTunes. And like, you really can't find it right now. It's like you have to like find like a DVD copy of it or something from like maybe like 2001, 2002 when everything got put on DVD.
Yep.
Have you seen that movie? Have you seen Better Off Dead?
Yeah, we talked about it last week, actually, on the podcast.
Okay.
I mentioned it as one of my honorable mentions, I think, because I wasn't sure how many had seen it. But I mentioned that the content doesn't work. It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's hilarious, but the content,
you can't joke
it would
about
be
suicide
hard.
anymore.
No.
I mean, you shouldn't have been able to joke about it then either, but we've just got more aware of life.
Yeah.
Anyway, I agree with this comment.
I think we're definitely more sensitive to those issues, and we don't just make light of them as easily. At least not. Hopefully not. We'll say at least hopefully not as mainstream. Like, you know, some comics may still do that to be edgy or different, but like we had movies that just dealt with that stuff in a little straight up lighthearted manner. Anyway, super listener Chad Fackler says to Better Off Dead, he says classic. He says also One Crazy Summer.
I don't know what that is.
So I don't think I've seen One Crazy Summer. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that. And then we're going to go over to Instagram. We have an Instagram response this week. This is from Jay Windleborn, my good old buddy from high school, Jim. He says, I didn't hear Princess Bride come up in your lists of movies from the 80s that have held up well. That one is so quotable and funny. Rodents of unusual size? I don't think they exist. Jim, we agree with you. Princess Bride does hold up. However, we just said a little earlier, we hope that there's a shortage of perfect movies in the world. So it would be a pity to mess with that one. Like, we hope no one ever touches it and it gets left completely alone forever.
Agree.
Anyway, Super Friends, thank you so much for your answers. Those were, great stuff. Very thought-provoking. I'm glad we're giving Matt the business on this Batman 1989 business.
There was one comment.
No, I left a couple. But there was some other stuff to other things. I'm just saying.
Give it to
you're wrong, me. I'm right.
Give
whatever.
It to me.
But we do appreciate it. Interacting with you, the Super Friends, is literally one of our favorite things about this podcast. So, Matt, Super Friends are answering questions. They're out there. What can they do to help us out this week?
All right, so this week, pull up your computer and write a letter to your mom, and then just save it and don't send it. And then set a reminder to open it in 5 years, and I hope you feel the same way. All right, the next thing that you can do while you've got this computer up is subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, whatever other ways that you choose to listen to us. Like, subscribe, comment, review, engage. That's what we ask for you this week, is engage with us.
Okay.
That's it.
I like how you want the Super Friends to come help out the podcast and also to be introspective about how they feel about their mother now and then see if 5 years from now they feel the same.
Yeah, just kind of, get a feel for the relationship.
Would that work, Matt, with mother-in-laws?
Sure. Why not? Yes.
So should we write a letter to our mother-in-law this week and then not send it and then open it up in 5 years?
No. I don't want to do that. Just choose one. Choose either your mother or your mother-in-law. Whomever you feel like you would like to speak with. And
I wish you could have seen Matt's face when he said no. Nah.
Just choose
that
one.
Was classic.
Okay, just choose one.
Choose
Come
one.
on, don't be.
Choose one. All right. Well, let's move on before you get us in trouble any further.
Right on.
Or I get us in trouble any further. So, Matt, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a trailer out, the first trailer for Disney's The Jungle Cruise movie.
Yes.
And I remember we talked about this. I think you and I talked about this a little while ago about how we heard that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was going to be in this and Emily Blunt was going to be in this. And I distinctly have the feeling that I kind of poo-pooed this whole idea.
Yes.
That I thought this was kind of silly. Does that ring a bell to you?
It feels correct. It feels like something you would poo-poo on.
Yeah.
Just based on what we knew about it at the time.
Which was literally nothing other
Who was
than
gonna be in it.
They're making a movie. Now, which is interesting because I remember hearing years ago that they were going to make a movie based on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland.
Yeah.
And I poo-pooed all over that back then. And I said, this sounds ridiculous. How are you going to do a movie that's engaging about a ride at Disneyland?
Yeah.
And I'm going to be completely honest. I was wrong. That first movie.
So
I'm only going to say the first one. The Curse of the Black Pearl was a great movie. They took an idea, a germ, a seed of an idea based off of this, 10-minute ride at Disneyland, and they turned it into a story, and it felt like it was an extension of that ride, and thematically it all fit, and like it was a great story. It was a lot of fun. It is, in my opinion, the pacing on that movie is a little slow at times. I've tried to go back and rewatch it now, and I struggle to not fall asleep sometimes because it is a longer movie. And I'm like, okay, come on, let's get back to, some of the action. Let's move the story along a little bit. This is taking too long. So by today's standard, pacing could be a little bit better. And then, of course, they made a whole bunch of other Pirates movies.
100.
Yeah. And the first one was the best. It was
Far
diminishing returns, in my opinion.
It got worse. Second one was okay.
That.
Third one was bad. Fourth one was, I don't even know. Worse, probably.
And I think they made a fifth one,
They made a fifth one, and it was also bad.
Yeah. So I poo-pooed that idea. Now a trailer's out for Jungle Cruise, which I poo-pooed this idea too because I said this is kind of silly. I watched that trailer. Have you seen the trailer?
I've seen the trailer.
What is your impression of that trailer?
I'll give my perspective on what I was expecting to. I kind of liked this idea a little bit. I like Jungle Cruise. It's kind of a cool thing. I like jungle themes just in general. We have some jungle stuff in our house we decorate. It's just cool. I like jungle stuff. So Jungle Cruise was a cool idea for me. And then I saw the trailer and it was not at all what I was expecting it to be. And I don't know if that's good or bad yet. I haven't quite let it settle. I think I wanted it to be better looking than it looked to me. So I've gone backwards on my excitement, and I want to know where you sit with your interest.
I've actually gone forwards because my bar was so low that I watched this thing and went, oh, they actually appears, and I'm going to say appears, and Super Friends, let me be clear, this is just a trailer. I'm not trying to get super hyped over a trailer. Yeah. I know Peter Christensen's stance that if he's interested in a movie already, he won't even watch the trailer because he doesn't want spoilers. I don't know how anyone would be like super stoked about this movie just to begin with. So my bar was so low that after watching the trailer, I went, this appears like it maybe has a plot and is not just going to be how do we retell this 8-minute ride at Disneyland, but it's more of like, how can we take the general theme of that ride, and a riverboat captain going through the Amazon on this cruise with a bunch of people, and how can we spin that kind of idea into something with a story in a movie? And I kind of went, okay, they've found a way to kind of make a story, and in a nod to the corny jokes that they make in Disneyland, you kind of get the idea that, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock's character, is kind of this shuckster. He's, this con man, basically, right? And he's trying to, like, put on a good show, and he, knocks this little thing and water runs out. He's like, look, it's what everyone came to see, the backside of water, which I laughed actually really hard at that part in the trailer, because that literally is one of the corniest jokes they use in Disneyland when you go on that ride.
And it's every time. A lot of the jokes are different when you go. That happens 100% of the time.
Yep. And I like that. Like, I like that little nod, like little wink to like, okay, this is, directly lifted from the Disneyland ride. So here's the thing, though. I actually think this could be a fun movie. Yeah. It has kind of a feel like kind of the Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, where it's going to be kind of that same, I don't know, what you want to say, like 1920s, 1930s type of feel. Maybe even like late 1800s, but like some kind of a period piece. But it's going to have action. It's going to have some excitement. It looks like it's going to have some laughs. Some of them may be really funny. Some of them may be a little forced and corny intentionally. Right. I also think it's going to be a good vehicle for Dwayne Johnson to really kind of display his comedic chops. Because I do think he is a very funny human being in general. So I'm a little more excited than I was. But what I'm actually surprised by is that Disney literally took what I would consider to be an almost unusable idea potentially from a Disneyland ride, and they're going to make it into a movie. And I think that in the end of the day, it's going to be good. I don't think it's going to be great. I mean, I don't think it's going to be the next, I don't know, Inception, where people are talking about it over the water cooler for weeks. But I think it's going to sell popcorn, and I think it's going to do what they're intending it to do. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be a success?
Maybe. I'm still on the maybe fence about it. I don't know that I love the idea of him being a con artist, and it makes me think that they took the original. So obviously when you go on the Jungle Cruise, none of the animals are real, and it's all kind of this cruise you're going on. But I always felt that they're not real, but it's not because the animals are not real. It's because this is the life we live in. You can't actually have real animals on this cruise. But they lifted that idea of it being a fake cruise and put it directly in the movie. So for me, it spins the attraction on its head for me. Maybe I'm being conned at Disneyland, and I didn't like that.
Well, that's definitely happening.
Well, I'm definitely being conned at Disneyland, and I know that, and I continue to pay for it every year to go. But you know what I'm saying with the ride? So it was just an interesting take, and I'm not sure how it settles with my childhood yet. So that's the only reason that I'm not excited. I think that the idea of going on an actual cruise and this adventure and this aspect of he doesn't actually really know what he's doing. He's not actually a good skipper. He's just a good con artist. It could lead to some funny moments, some interesting adventures that they weren't anticipating. So we'll see.
Okay. So I thought it'd be kind of fun. It's kind of silly, but I kind of am leaning into this silliness tonight. We should come up, and you know this, but we should come up with 2 rides from like Disneyland or Disney World or California Adventure, something like that we think has the potential to develop a story and be adapted into a Disney movie. Because obviously we know that Disney's remaking movies. They're remaking animated movies. Now they're doing another ride based off of an attraction, which I think they'd also did like the Haunted Mansion.
It was terrible.
Kind of loose.
It's such a good idea, but terrible execution.
But they've done that before, so I thought it'd be interesting to see if you and I could maybe come up with an idea or two that maybe Disney could use for their next attraction-based movie.
I love it. I love it. So when I started going through this, the first thing I thought of was the Haunted Mansion. I was like, that would make such a good movie. And then I remembered that it already existed and it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and I've gone back and I've watched it, and I might watch it again this Halloween just for kicks and giggles. But it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. There's much more potential there to make it an actually scary movie. Anyway, I won't go on that trail. So here's what I got.
Okay.
Number 1 is a prequel to a ride. So it's based on the ride still, but it's a prequel. It's how this attraction came to be, and this is not a ride. So I started out with just an attraction at Disneyland, and it is the Enchanted Tiki Room. So this is, in my mind, a movie that has very little to do with humans, right? This is all about the birds. It's a prequel to the Tiki Room, how they basically got to the Tiki Room. And it is a story about Jose, Michael, Pierre, and Fritz, how they met each other, how they became acquainted with one another. It's a friendship story. It's an adventure story about these birds and how they escaped the clutches of this poaching jerk of a, like in, was it George of the Jungle? No, or like Tarzan, you know, like those ruthless types of, anyway, they're escaping, they're fleeing the jungle, and how they all end up together, happy, singing, and how that all works, and how they're introduced to each other, why they're friends, and that's... Would this be animated or like live action? It's live action. So the birds, but I mean, it'll be like the Tiki Room in that the birds can talk, they can interact, but the humans can't understand them. That's in my mind how this works. Even though you go to the attraction, clearly they're talking to us. Yeah. But in my mind, that's not how this works. It's a cool movie. I feel it.
That is interesting. I would not have thought of the Enchanted Tiki Room as a attraction you could make a movie out of. Well, now, which is interesting because I really like what you did there. You took a nugget of, like, we have birds that sing and talk and they're all together. Your story is like, how do they get there? Like, you know, the action and adventure that got them to that point, which is, I think, kind of like what Disney did with the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? They took like some nuggets of potential story and then they developed a whole story for it. So in that vein, I have my first one. It's Matterhorn.
Oh man, what a good idea!
And you just call the film Matterhorn.
Totally just call it Matterhorn.
So the idea is it's like an adventure. It's an adventurer, a mountaineer in like the 1940s who has heard of this mythical beast, the abominable snowman, and he's on a quest to prove that he exists, whether because he's bragged that it has and no one believed him, and like he's determined he's going to go. He's going to have a wacky sidekick, and I was thinking of kind of like the sidekick in Dangerous Beasts and Where to Find Them, the guy that's the Muggle,
Kowalski,
the non-mage, Kowalski. Yes. I'm thinking like like that's like the sidekick, kind of like that, you know, really kind of bumbling, funny kind of, you know, personality. And then of course, like, you know, he's going to spend time, you know, getting to the mountain and dealing with people back home and, you know, trying to overcome odds just to get to Matterhorn. And then he's going to have to get up the mountain. And of course, at some point, you're going to be able to have some sort of action sequence. Maybe he sees the abominable snowman. Maybe there's some sort of big storm. And they have to ride sleds back down the mountain, which would then kind of tie into the whole Alpine Matterhorn kind of ride. I think that could be a small nugget that they could kind of go in this kind of action-adventure kind of theme and have it be a period piece, and whether or not they actually show the abominable snowman or not, it's more about this person's journey to not only prove to others that he can do things, that he's willing to do things, but also prove to himself that he can do hard things. Anyway.
Yes.
Matterhorn.
Yes. Okay. I'm actually really good with that. That's a really good one. Because there's not a lot we know about. I mean, you go on the attraction and there's some things you can pick up, right? There's a Yeti, abominable snowman thing. Yeah. And then there's like broken, there's like a
Tracks
track
and
and there's like a
stuff.
plane,
Yeah.
I think, and there's different things you could kind of make up and give nods to. That's a good one. Man. Dang, that's like my favorite ride at Disneyland. Honestly, I love that ride so much. That's a good one. Okay, I'm on board.
Okay.
All right.
Nice.
So the second one that I have is Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
Oh, okay.
So there already exists a backstory to this, and I'm going to lean into the backstory, right? So this is a mining town. Obviously, you know that just by going on the attraction, but they don't tell you a whole lot about the backstory. But anyway, in each park, it's like a different town, but at Disneyland, it's like Rainbow Ridge, I think. So anyway, it's a mining town. These people show up and they start mining the heck out of this because there's gold. And what happens is they come to find out that this is actually sacred Indian ground. And the story is that an earthquake comes and destroys the mines and destroys kind of where this whole mining town is, and everybody leaves or they die or whatever happens. When you enter the attraction, what's actually happened is the railroads are running by themselves. There's nobody else there. So it's kind of the runaway train type situation. So I'm envisioning this as almost no, I'm not gonna say almost. This is a horror movie. Okay.
Ooh.
And it is directed by Tim Burton with music by Danny Elfman.
1989 Batman. Yeah, gotcha.
We're getting closer. So it has. So we get a 5-minute scene at the beginning of the movie about all that I just described. The mining town, everything like that. And then we pick up with present day, which will be not this day, but maybe back in 1955, let's say.
Okay.
And 1855, I mean, it doesn't matter. A long time ago. It follows the story of this girl in her 20s who, she lost her father to this horrible accident in the earthquake, and she, wants to know more. And so she goes back and she interacts with this. It's not an island, but it's this like condemned area that nobody goes to. And she interacts with these beings and these ghosts that exist there in this Indian burial ground. And she comes, obviously it's a coming of age and a story about discovering who you are and discovering more about her father and, why he was looking for gold. It was more than just to be rich kind of a thing. And there was the family aspect of it. And it just ends up, as scary as it is, because it will be horror focused. There will be lots of jump scares and ghosts and creepy stuff. It'll be PG-13, hard PG-13. No, just a regular PG-13. But this is the one I've thought about the most. I just think it's such a cool attraction and it already has such a cool backstory that there already exists the skeleton for a really cool movie, I think. And that's my vision for that movie. Throw in some good charismatic actors and actresses, some really good special effects, some explosions trying to chase her off, discovering, coming to appreciation of Indian culture too, maybe. Throw that in there, right? It's 2019. Yeah. It'll be 2025 when this is released. We're all about equality and culture. Let's figure it out. Let's find out why this was sacred. Anyway, I've been talking a long time about this movie, but it's going to be good.
It sounds good.
Right?
It sounds good. I really like that idea. Really like that idea. Okay, my last one. I had to dig a little bit.
Okay.
But I've got something, and I kind of like it. I don't know if I like it as much as Matterhorn, because I think Matterhorn's a really good idea. But Mark Twain's Riverboat. So, it's going to be like a gambling movie set in like the late 1800s, and it's going to be kind of like in the vein of like Maverick. You remember the Mel Gibson movie, right? So the story's about a down-on-his-luck gambler who ends up finding a lucky coin that reverses his fortunes. And he ends up going on this riverboat, and basically he stumbles into this scheme that this corrupt riverboat captain, which you don't know he's corrupt right at first, is basically trying to swindle all of, like, the top gamblers in the world. And so he's trying to build this reputation that his boat, pays out the best and has the best tournaments and, whatever. Yeah. And basically he's got, like, crooked dealers that are helping this captain kind of swindle all these gamblers that he knows. And he's trying to bring them in for these high stake games and, like, a tournament sort of thing. Then he's got toughs that are hired to try to go after our down on the luck gambler, because they realize, like, after they overhear, like, a conversation that, he wasn't having a good time, and then he found this lucky coin, and now this is what's going on. And so the captain believes that this lucky coin actually is some sort of, like, Incan coin that has this, magic upon it that's going to allow him to not only, like, swindle all these gamblers, but also give him good luck, so that he's going to be able to take all this money and, like, go and invest it in, like, New York and in, like, what's, kind of the modern equivalent of Wall Street at the time, which actually was Wall Street, and, like, banking. And so, like, he's looking to use that to, like, try to take over, because what he really wants to do is he basically wants to buy a governorship in one of the, like, new territories out west, like somewhere Missouri-ish, somewhere around there, maybe going into, like, I don't know, Nebraska, Iowa, something like that. And so it would all take place on this, what we would understand to be the Mark Twain riverboat. And of course, Mark Twain would actually kind of show up and be there to, like, be basically kind of like chronicling this big, huge, gathering of gamblers and despots and whatnot, because that would appeal to his sense of comedy, because he kind of, was into, like, parodying and, kind of mocking and tongue-in-cheek these things. And so he'd want to see, like, what does it look like when all these kind of, perceived gamblers and crooked guys all get together? Like, what's the con? How does it go down? Yeah. And he'd want to write about it. And so Mark Twain's Riverboat.
That sounds good.
I mean, it could be.
I don't know why it wouldn't be. That sounds great. I would watch it. It kind of has a feel of, like, or when you mentioned that Mark Twain would kind of be in there, in and out, like, observing things, it reminded me of The Great Gatsby a little bit. Just kind of him out there observing things, throwing these massive parties, but not really being in the middle of it. Anyway, that's just what that made me think of. But I think that sounds cool. That sounds fun. Yeah. I like period pieces too, so that sounds like a good one.
And if you're gonna make a movie based off of a Disney attraction, I think it's easier to go back and do it as a period piece than to try to do, like, some, like, modern interpretation of, like, Matterhorn now.
Yes, then they tried to do it with Tomorrowland. Like, they tried to make them, and nobody liked it. That movie sucked. Yeah. I didn't even see it, and I know it sucked.
Yeah, if you go the nostalgia route, you can kind of set it in a time period, and so people suspend disbelief some. Yep. And it makes for a better movie watching experience. Okay, so Matt, give me your two again. Let's hit the highlights. You're choosing
The Enchanted Tiki Room
Thunder Mountain
and Big Thunder Mountain.
Sorry, what was the first one again?
Enchanted Tiki Room, the prequel.
Yeah, the Enchanted Tiki prequel.
That one I really, really like. And then Big Thunder Mountain, but as kind of a horror self-discovery piece.
Nice. And I've got the Matterhorn as, like, that 1940s kind of mountaineer adventure movie, and then Mark Twain's Riverboat as kind of like a late 1800s gambling movie with, shady characters and crooked captains and purchasing governorships and whatnot. I think we have some solid ideas. I don't know who we got to talk to. Maybe Bob Iger himself.
Bobby.
To pitch these ideas, but we got to do something about this. But here's the deal, Super Friends. We want to hear from you. We want you to come up with an idea of a Disney park attraction, whether that's California Adventure, Disney World, Disneyland, I don't know, Disney, Euro Disney, whatever. Come up with an attraction and come up with a story about how that could be made into a feature film. And we want to hear from you. Next week, we will talk about that. Hit us up at all those places, the email, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, the voicemail, which again is 801-477-7687 in case you want to leave a voicemail. We do play those on the show, barring that they're, safe for, mixed company. And we'll talk about your answers next week. And I'm excited to hear what you say, because we have some very smart listeners that are super friends of this show. And I know that there's things that we're probably overlooking, Matt, and they're going to come in with some great ideas, and they're going to blow us away.
Absolutely. I hope that's what happens.
Also keep bringing in your hate for Matt for his 89 Batman rant and how he's, totally against that. I'm okay with that. I will read those next week as well.
Goodness gracious. Let it die.
Never. It's Michael Keaton's Batman. It can't die.
It can, and it should. Oh, man, I'm really laying into it now. It's a good movie. I watched it last week. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying it doesn't really hold up.
Anyway, Super Friends, we love you. We're glad you're here with us another week. Matt, I hope you have, once again, another good week with Lando, man, that he's continuing sleeping and all that. Like, that's awesome.
Yep, life is good. He's a good little kid, no doubt about it.
Well, from all of us here at the Fortress of Nerditude, to all of you out there, wherever you may be, may the Force be with you, always.